Hello everyone, thank you so much for coming. We would want to take time to acknowledge on-site as well as the online visual audience for coming today to support this presentation for the first stories, Ice Age Art of Sulawesi with Professor Adam Brumm. And this event is co-presented by the Leakey Foundation, the Chicago Council on Science and Technology, as well as the Field Museum, three institutions that are all united by a shared mission to inspire curiosity and advance public understanding of science. So thank you so much. Welcome. My name is Paul Bandama. I'm curator here for African anthropology. And I listened to today's talk with lots of interest because of the exciting areas of overlap between some of the things that excite me, as well as my research in Africa, with the kind of work that Professor Adam Brumm is going to be presenting today. Where I live for a treat, Professor Adam Brumm is professor of archaeology at Griffith University in Queensland, Australia. His contributions to the field, they span over 21 years of research in Indonesia mostly, including extensive fieldwork, Flores as well as Sulawesi, the two islands that loom large in our understanding of early humans. In Flores, his team unearthed fossils of archaic hominins that are the oldest found on the island and seeming to present a form ancestral to the celebrated hobby, the Homo florensis. In Sulawesi, his discoveries, with numerous holics of these, include a series of the Ice Age cave paintings, will be among the top 10 scientific breakthroughs in 2014 as well as 2019 by the American Association of the Advancement of Science. So we are talking about groundbreaking work here. Completed his PhD at the University of Australian National University in 2007 and has since held several research positions throughout the globe, including the University of Cambridge. I am not here to deal to his big profile, and I'll allow the next moment just to put our heads together to welcome Adam to the podium to hear more about his work.
Thank you very much for coming, everyone. Okay, well, let's get started. So, as I very much appreciate the kind introduction, Foreman, and I'd just like to thank the Field Museum and the Leakey Foundation from San Francisco for allowing me to come here with the other side of the world to talk about my research to you guys. It's just been such a privilege, and I very much enjoy. I've always wanted to come to the US. I was here last year briefly in San Francisco. It was my first trip here, and I just loved it. So hopefully we can find something interesting to talk about today. All right, let's get started. Okay, I'll just quickly start just by acknowledging all the various scientific counterparts that I work with in Indonesia and Australia, especially the National Research and Innovation Agency in Indonesia, or BRIN. You know, none of this research can be done without my collaboration with Indonesia's leading science institute. And so just want to thank those guys, and I'll do a little bit of acknowledgement at the end. This is a long-running project that, you know, represents a collaboration between Australia and Indonesia. And in particular, I'd just like to thank these four host colleagues of mine in Indonesia. Phil Hakin is a lovely bloke, worked with one of the most senior archaeologists in Sulawesi, as well as Iwan Sumantri, his long-term colleague, and my PhD students, former PhD student, Dr. Ari Agus Octaviana, the rock art specialist, and Pa Basran, who's our overall archaeologist, right-hand man, great guys. And I couldn't do the work without these guys. So thank you to all those four. Okay, so to get started, I've only had very brief time in Chicago, right? And I'm obsessed with, I was like all kids growing up in the 80s, I was obsessed with Ferris Bueller's Day Off. So naturally coming to Chicago, I had to go to the Art Institute, and I brushed past, you know, thousands of years, hundreds of years of, you know, artistic merit and creativity and output just purely to get to the, you know, the famous, what was the name of I can't remember the name of the big one at the top, the French artist producing the scene where Catherine Fry, one of the characters, has like an exorcist. Yes. as ominous, right? You'll forgive me, as a existential crisis when he's staring at this image. I had to see that. But of course, I saw all of these incredible masterpieces, okay? Everything from Picasso to Rembrandt. It was just a really eye-opening experience. It was just incredible. And, as I was going through the Art Institute, it occurred to me, what is the most important work of art in human history? Okay, we're seeing some of the greatest works of art right here in Chicago, and I've seen them in France and various other places, seeing the Mona Lisa. What is the greatest work of art in human history? Is a very big question. Okay. Now, as an archaeologist, I think one very good candidate could be these images. Okay. These are the oldest artworks known to humanity at present. Okay. These come from caves in South Africa. They're dated to around about 100,000 years ago. And these appear to be the earliest known images or markings that can be interpreted as art. Okay. They're on little small stones. This thing on the left here, it's on a small piece of ochre, and it's a series of markings made with the edge of a stone tool that form this geometric pattern, like some sort of cross-hatched image or a lattice-like pattern. It seems to have it's an abstract image. We don't know what it means, but it's definitely art. Okay. So that dates to 100,000 years ago. And here we also have similar abstract geometric engravings on these fragments of ostrich eggshell. Originally, this would have been an ostrich eggshell container, probably used for holding liquid, water, or something like that. They've broken over time. The outside of them were decorated with these geometric engravings, okay? These are the oldest known, widely accepted examples of art produced by us, our species, from anywhere in the world. So, yeah, logically, to me, this could be the most important. This could be the most plausible candidate for the most important art in human history. Okay. But then also, I guess, if we start to move forward in time, quite a significant length of time, and then far away from Africa, from Southern Africa to Central Europe, Western Europe, we have this incredible artwork. Okay. This is the so-called Lion Man. All right. This is a example of portable art. It's about a 30 centimeter high figurine carved on the tip of a mammoth tusk. Okay, so this is ivory. And this is a really interesting image. It dates to about 40,000 years ago. It was excavated right on the cusp of World War II and then lay in pieces for many decades until it was reconstructed. And it's this very curious and very important image, okay, that appears to be a single being that has the body of a human and the head of a cave lion. Okay. So clearly there's no being that exists like this in nature. All right. It's because this is what we call a therianthrope. Okay. A figure that combines the qualities of both a human and at least one other form of animal. Every folklore, every culture and religious system in the world has examples of therianthropes. Everything from the animal-headed gods to the werewolves of medieval Europe. These are images of unreal beings that are conjured out of our minds, okay? And this is long been seen as the oldest known therianthrope in the world, okay? The oldest known surviving image of a therianthrope. So, in one sense, perhaps this could be seen as the most important artwork because this had long provided the earliest archaeological evidence we have for the human ability to conceive of the supernatural. Okay, just take a moment to think how important that is. It's at the cornerstone of all religious belief. Is this, this faith or this idea that there can be unreal things that we don't see with our eyes, but, animal-headed beings or whatever. There are creatures like that out there. This is a very important part of what it means to be human. Maybe this is the most important artwork. Then we had this. Now, this is a little bit younger, maybe dates to about 21,000 to 14,000 years ago. This is from a cave, Lustal Cave in France. I'm sure you've all heard of it. Very famous, iconic rock art site. And this is, you can see on the right here, this is a plan view of the cave. And then there's this little shaft-like feature here. We've got the rectangle around where we had this enigmatic image. Okay. This is called the scene in the shaft. And it depicts what seems to be a human-like figure on the left with the body, a being that has the body of a human and the head of a bird. Okay. So you can see it's kind of like a stick-like figure. So you have to use your imagination a little bit, but this seems to be an early depiction of a therianthrope. Okay. This is another bird-headed human. And you can see there's a few other objects depicted in the artwork. Here seems to be a broken spearhead with a Isaac Magdalenian type spear, harpoon-like spear on it. This looks to be one of the like spear throwers, which often had a carved animal represented on one part. You can see that bird-like thing there. The head of the bird here is represented in similar fashion to the head of this human. This is an important artwork, okay? Because for a very long time, it was seen as the earliest evidence we have for a scene in the early human cave art, okay? Now, when I say a scene, the dictionary definition here provides lots of explanations that are not particularly useful to us. So let's just get rid of those. And I guess the one that comes, closest to what we have there in that ancient cave in France is this one: a sequence of continuous action in a play, film, opera, or book, such as a scene from Tarantino's latest movie. Now, obviously, this is not particularly useful to us either, because this is this cave art is a static image. It's not a moving film. So I guess if we look, say, at this medieval artwork, this gives us more of an idea of what we're talking about when we talk about a scene in the early art. So here, it's pretty easy for everyone to see. There's a whole bunch of different figures represented. You've got these human hunters mounted on their horseback. Some of them had weapons, hunting swords and bows. You've got their dogs. They're chasing after these two deer, which are clearly an important part of this scene. You have various environmental features like their castle in the background. You can see elements of the forest and the ground surface. We don't know exactly what this artwork, outside of the written text associated with it, we don't know exactly what it means, but just based on the depiction of multiple interacting figures, all in spatial proximity to each other and interacting in an unmistakable way, we can see that this tells a story of some kind, okay? You don't need insider knowledge about what the artist who created this image had in mind. Anyone can see it and say, okay, this is telling a story of some kind, probably something to do with hunting. Okay, there may well be deep religious overtones or hidden meanings behind it. Yes, of course. But we can see, okay, this is a scene about hunting because of the way these figures are interactive. And so when we consider that definition and we look at this recent definition by Professor Ian Davidson, an Australian archaeologist who's written a whole book about rock art scenes, this is his definition, okay? A scene can be identified from a set of images in spatial proximity to each other from which, without any knowledge other than the images themselves, an observer can infer actions taking place among the actors represented in the images. So this really fits with what we have in Lascaux Cave. This is a scene, okay? This bird-headed therianthrope is interacting with this bison. It seems to have wounded it, and you can see the entrails coming out of its stomach. There's something going on here. There's action taking place. This is a story, okay? What we're seeing here is a story communicated through this ancient art from 20,000 years ago. That's an important thing to keep in mind, because storytelling is a very important part of what it means to be human. In fact, it's a fundamental part of what it means to be human, okay? Telling stories allows us to communicate information and pass on knowledge. It helps us to make sense of our world, religious stories, cosmological beliefs, all of these things communicated through old traditions that help us to make sense of the world around us. Sorry, there's some problem here. What's going on? One sec. There we go. It's also a way of forming emotional bonds with other people through storytelling. We all buy into the one overarching story about the creation of the world, for example, very important part of religious belief in all societies. And stories connect us to the past and to the world of the imagination, in particular through myths, through folk tales, through narrative fictions. We can all start to see that we have a cultural past and we can have a future as well. Okay, storytelling is fundamentally important to what it means to be human. Okay, now, these two images, those two early artworks, the scene in the shaft at Lascaux Cave and the famous Lion Man depiction, amongst innumerable other incredible artworks from these Ice Age caves in France and Spain, have long been seen by archaeologists as evidence that something profound happened to humanity in Western Europe. Okay, around about 40,000 years ago, there was a so-called human creative explosion or upper Paleolithic revolution or a big bang in human thinking that led to this great acceleration in human intellectual capacity, and in particular the capacity for artistic expression that spread out of Europe like a bow wave and eventually came to inspire humans throughout the world, okay? This has long been this long cherished theory or belief that something happened in Europe. There's something important about Europe about 40,000 years ago, exemplified by this early art, okay? That's been the story up until quite recently. Has dominated the textbooks for a long time. Okay, so with that in mind, now we come to the part of the world where I'm doing my research in Sulawesi. I'm sure you all know where Sulawesi is, although most Australians, the only part of Indonesia they know is Bali, and even they don't realize that's actually a country, island in Indonesia. They think it's its own country. Anyway, Sulawesi is right there. And I want to tell you, I'm going to start to talk to you about the cave art that we've discovered there and dated. And this is an important guy here, Mr. Hamrullah or Ampu. Okay, he's an archaeologist, a local archaeologist. He's one of the Bugis Makassar people, and he's an incredible caver and a climber. And he has discovered what I think, in my opinion, is probably the most important individual artwork, in terms of our understanding of the history of art. He's the guy that was responsible for discovering it. There he is, looking at doing what all Indonesian men like to do, which is looking at daggers. Okay, so part of the world I'm working in is a limestone karst area. Okay, so these are a series of limestone hills and caves known as Maros, and it's located in the very southwestern peninsula of Sulawesi. It's a very strangely shaped island, the 11th largest island in the planet, very big place. And the Maros karst themselves is roughly an area about the size of New York City, okay, filled with caves of every description. It's an archaeological paradise, lots and lots of cave art sites in particular. And now I've been working there since 2011 with my team of archaeologists from Indonesia, some from Australia. It's a long-running project with the National Research Centre of Innovation. I can't remember the name of them. BRIN, my Indonesian colleagues, National Research and Innovation Agency. They change their name every couple of years, so you have to forgive me. And we've been exploring these caves for quite a while, okay? Lots and lots of caves, hundreds and hundreds of caves, and we keep discovering new ones each year. Now, since the 1950s, I was led to this area for an entirely different purpose, nothing to do with rock art. I was there because I've been working on another island in Indonesia where we found these fossils of this very curious extinct creature called Homo floresiensis, who Dr. Foreman mentioned just before. And we eventually came to Sulawesi because we were on the trail of the ancestors of this creature. And so I was digging these cave sites, hoping to find fossils of these ancient humans. But we did know about the existence of this early cave art in some of these caves. They'd first been discovered, these images, in the 1950s, or first reported in the scientific literature. But they hadn't really no one was particularly interested in them. The European rock art sort of captivated everyone's gaze. The Australian rock art amongst archaeologists in my field was of greater interest. This cave art in Maros was seen as, it's interesting, but it's probably not that old. It's in a humid tropical environment. Any images we can see still on the walls, they can't be more than a few thousand years old. Probably just Neolithic farmers, Stone Age farmers created it 3,000 years ago, end of the story. But, in one of those examples of how curiosity-driven research can lead to, unexpected vistas, we set out to try to date the art, okay? Because I was curious, how old is it really? Sorry, I keep leaning on this. So, I have to tell you, rock art is a very difficult thing to date. It's notoriously difficult. In some cases in Europe, where the pigment that they use to create the rock art is made from charcoal, and that's a pretty good way to date it because you can date it using the radiocarbon method, right? So you can actually date the pigment itself. But when, in the case in Indonesia, when most of the cave art is made from natural earth pigments, essentially rocks like ironstone hematite or ochre that these people would crush up, pulverize into a powder, mix it with liquid to form the paint. You can't date that, okay, because it's rock, so you can't date it. So that was a big problem that we face, from the outset, which is one of the reasons why there's a huge amount of rock art out there, but we've only dated a fraction of it everywhere in the world. It's just very difficult to date. But then one day in 2011, on one of the days off from the dig, I was exploring. My colleague Pabudi took me to see a cave art site that I'd never been to before. It's called Liang Jariye, the Cave of the Fingers. And there were lots of images of human hands, okay? So these were what we call hand stencils. People would place their hand against the wall, spray a mouthful of paint around it, and when they took their hand away, there would be the negative outline of the human hand. There were lots of hand stencils in this cave, and when I started to look closely at them, I noticed some of them had these weird sort of knobbly, bumpy looking things that had seemingly grown over the top of them. You can see them here in this image. They're kind of like wart-like protrusions. And it turned out that that one observation, sometimes it happens in science and field observations, that single observation in a matter of seconds can then open up this new door to this whole arena of new possibilities. And that was the moment. Okay. That was the moment, walking into that cave, casually looking around, and then, oh, what are those funny looking things? Bang. Okay. That's where it started. There's a hell of a lot of other stuff we had to do after that moment until now. Okay. But that was how it started. And that's, to me, the excitement of science and archaeology. Okay. But either way, I'm digressing. So here I've put this image through an image enhancement program just to show up the hand stencil a little bit better. You can see these little growths. Turns out that those things are called coralloids biliiformes. Okay. So they're essentially like miniature stalagmites or stalactites that form naturally within these limestone caves on the walls through precipitation of moisture and water and stuff like that. And they're known as, cavers call them cave popcorn because they look a little bit like little nodular bits of popcorn. But another way to look at them is as though they were cave onions, okay, because they're comprised of all these thin little layers of calcium carbonate that build up through time in these sort of onion-like formations, and you can date them, okay? You can date when those tiny little layers of calcium carbonate first started to form using a method known as uranium series analysis, which essentially measures the radioactive decay of uranium into thorium within the groundwater, essentially within the mineral deposits that form, that comprise the calcium carbonate. So this is actually quite an accurate way of determining when these little growths started to form on the art, thereby providing a minimum age for the art, okay? We haven't been able to date the art itself, but we can say that it must be at least as old as these little mineral growths that start to form on top of it. So using this method, we've been able to infer minimum ages for quite a few of the artworks now in the Maros caves. So we first started doing that back in 2012, and within quite quickly, we realized that these images were a hell of a lot older than we anticipated, okay, like over 10 times older. And that was a big surprise. So we published the first dates back in 2014, and they turned out to be at least 40,000 years old, okay? That was a minimum age. We dated a couple of hand stencils and this image of a pig. The pig has a slightly younger minimum age of about 35,000, but one hand stencil just to the rear of the pig dated to a minimum of about 40,000. So just to put that into context, at that time, 2014, the oldest rock art anywhere else in the world was in Europe, in Spain, and it was around about 41,000. Okay. So right now in that one discovery, we had Ice Age rock art on the opposite side of the inhabited old world, at an equivalent age as the oldest stuff in Europe. Okay. And that was considered by our scientific peers as a bit of a breakthrough. Science magazine considered that to be one of the top 10 breakthroughs of the year in any field of science. I've gone and looked at their top 10 list and from previous years, and very few of them have anything to do with archaeology or human evolution. Here are the few examples I could find. So it was nice to join the ranks of those. It was considered to be an important discovery at the time. So because it really changed our understanding, helped to change our understanding of where the earliest rock art would be. So that discovery led us on to continue to explore this area. At that time in the Maros Karst, so that time in 2011, when I first went there, there were about 90 individual rock art sites known in this area about the size of New York City. And after this initial discovery that there was Ice Age art there, our Indonesian colleagues and us continued doing intensive research there. And now there's over 600 individual rock art sites recorded, okay, in this one area. So we just keep finding more and more art. The more you explore, the more you find. And here are some of the incredible artworks that we had found in the last few years that I'm going to share with you now. This is a site called Liang Tadonge. And this here, we have this right up the back of the site. We have this incredible cave art scene. Okay. This is another scene, a story being told about what we call them the three little peaks. Okay. You can see these three peaks, 1, 2, 3. A lot of it's very deteriorated. The wall has flaked away. But this is this incredible big peak here, and these two ones that are less well preserved. They're interacting with each other in some way. We don't know what this scene means, but there's some sort of story being told here about the social lives of these pigs, okay? This is a really fascinating image because the one complete pig had a single small bit of cave popcorn that had grown over the rear foot of this pig, and we collected that and dated it, and this turned out to be even older, okay? A minimum age, 45,500 years old. We published this in 2021. At that time, this was the oldest known depiction of the animal world oldest known surviving depiction of the animal world found anywhere. Okay. That was an exciting find. Back to my friend Hamrula or Ambu. It was in 2016 in November, and Ambu is, a member of one of the rock art teams who was surveying, doing the usual thing, looking for more rock art sites. In this particular case, he was monitoring or recording a rock art site that was already known about in Maros. Okay. And they monitor because there's lots of mining that goes on there and pollution, and we're uncertain of the sort of damage that these mineral extraction activities are doing to the art. So he was a part of a monitoring team. They'd been to the site before. They knew the rock art was there, yeah. And they're looking at it. Okay, they're doing their job. And then he happened to look up at the ceiling, and he noticed for the first time that there's sort of this little hole in the ceiling, maybe 7 meters up above the ground, literally in the ceiling of this cave. And Ambu, being the sort of guy he is, this was not a photo of him at that time. He didn't have any caving or climbing equipment with him. So he climbed up a vine that was growing down the face of this mountain, essentially, like Tarzan style, shimmied 7 meters straight up in the air by climbing up this vine, and then sort of climbed his way across an almost vertical surface to shimmy his way into this hole, not really knowing what he would find, but he just wanted to explore it. And in that, it turns out that hole led to this whole other level of this cave complex, had this other level above it that we didn't know about. And inside that cave, up the back, he found this incredible artwork. Okay, so that's a picture of the hole. The ladder wasn't there at the time. That, I think, is the vine. The guy over front has got his hand resting on the vine. So he climbed up that and then sort of did a Spider-Man thing. I don't know how he did it, but Umbu's pretty crazy guy. And then he found this. Okay. So this is just one portion of this image. And this was the first time we'd ever discovered a scene, okay, in the cave art in Sulawesi. Oftentimes we would have, the image I showed before is a scene. I'm kind of doing this in wrong chronological order. This was actually the first scene that we found. And this is the first time we saw something that seemed to represent a hunting narrative. Okay. So this is one element of it. This is the clearest element. So I won't show you too much more, but we have here a dwarf buffalo, endemic to the island of Sulawesi, only found on the island of Sulawesi. They're about the size of a big Labrador. You can see its horns sticking up here. You can see its mouth. You can see its neck line and its front legs, and then its body. Okay. I haven't got the rest of it showing. And then you can see these curious creatures in front of it. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay. And then this long line that this creature here seems to be holding, and this other long line is connecting with the body of the Anoa, the dwarf buffalo that this other creature seems to be holding. And these little guys are really interesting. Okay. They're highly enigmatic because, as far as we can tell, these are like stick-like depictions of humans. Okay. Like stick-like men or humans, but then they had the body plans of humans, but some of them had the heads of what we think are animals. Okay. So I won't show you the rest of this scene. Anyway, this is a depiction of the Anoa, the dwarf buffalo. And this is the Sulawesi warty pig, which is, these ones here are Anoas. These here are warty pigs. And then that's probably an Anoa. And then you can see all these little weird figures in front of it. This is another weird human-like figure here. That's same scene I showed you before. And here we have what we think is a human with the head of a bird. You can see these two big lines projecting out of the face, which we think represent a beak. And here, this creature here has a body of a human and sort of the tail, probably from a mammal of some kind. This is a better image to show you. Okay. This is a nice close up. So here you can see again, this highlighted this one guy here. And you can see here this line coming down that he's holding some sort of an object, maybe a spear or a rope. We don't know. And here you can see these two arms holding it and the body. The rest of it's not well represented. It's deteriorated. And then you can have these two long projections coming out of the face, which we think represent a beak. And it doesn't look very impressive, but when we can compare it with one of the most famous images of a therianthrope in the early cave art from Lascaux, which I showed you before, to me, it's very similar. Okay. You had this stick-like body and with this sort of bird-like head. Okay. So we feel comfortable interpreting these early images for Lian Bulu Sipong 4 is the name of the site, as images of therianthropes. Okay. For the first time we had them, and in a hunting scene, they're depicted interacting with these animals as though they're hunting them. Okay. So this is some sort of story. We don't know what it means, but it's a story of some kind being communicated through this ancient heart in Sulawesi. This was, to me, a groundbreaking discovery. Okay. So we published this in the world's most prestigious scientific journal, Nature, in 2019. And it turned out that this was really old, okay? This is at least 48,000 years old. It was 44,000 when we published it initially, but then we redated it and the ages were actually a bit older than we first thought. But you use a new method. So this is getting up to the 50,000 mark. Very, very old, okay? First known narrative story. Okay. Now, the last artwork I'm going to tell you about is from a cave called Leon Karumpuang. This is also close. They're all in the same vicinity, near vicinity to each other. We published this last year, also in Nature. This is the first time I ever saw it. Often as I mentioned before to some of you guys who were at that event, I'm never usually there when we actually find these things. I was in Australia taking some time off in between these long field seasons. This is usually how I find out about them, by being WhatsApp images from the cave art site themselves. This is like one of the oldest cave art sites in the world, but you get perfect mobile phone reception. Vasran WhatsApping it to me. Oh yeah, motif rocket apa. What? I said, what? Oh yeah, what is the motif? What does it represent? Then I realized it was these depictions of a pig covered with popcorn. Hey, this just really got me excited. I went, babus, which means great. And both animals covered with popcorn. That's how it starts, just these conversations in WhatsApp. Lots of other stuff had to happen after this, but that's how it started. Just sitting there in my office, doing some accounting or whatever. Next minute, images of what turned out to be the oldest rock art in the world flash on my phone. This is bizarre. That's my life. Okay, so this is a close-up. It's very deteriorated, very faded. We've had to enhance it using an image enhancement program here, so it's not as vibrant as that in real life. And it's covered with popcorn. All these little whitish things are popcorn. It's exactly what we want to see as archaeologists. Although it's a bit frustrating because it obscures the imagery. But so I'll fade away that, show you a digital tracing of another scene. Okay. Here we have this big pig. Okay. You can see its snout, front legs, belly line, rear legs, tail, back line, really big fat pig interacting with H1, H2, H3, which are how we've imagined it to these three human-like figures. Okay. We don't know exactly whether they represent Darien throats. They're kind of hard to interpret. You can see this creature here is sort of flipped upside down. You can see the like human-like legs sticking out with the feet. You can get its arms sticking out there. One arm is possibly interacting with the pig. You can see this one here. It's got the head there, the body, the two arms. It's holding some sort of object which seems to be connecting with the throat of the pig, some sort of tool. And then you can see his two stumpy little legs. And then this rather grand figure out to the side here, which is kind of observing the action. We don't know what this means, but it's telling a story of some kind, okay? It might be another hunting narrative, or it could be some dreamlike vision or something. We don't know, but it's telling us something about human-animal relations, and it's telling a story, okay? And that's the important thing, because this image is the oldest of all, okay? We dated a whole series of popcorns that had formed over the top of it, and the oldest minimum age we got was 51,200 years, okay? So this is older, far older than anything we had from Europe, okay? And this is the oldest image that we've ever dated in Sulawesi, published so far. So we draw all these things together, okay? We looked at the two candidates for the most important art in the world, the Lion Man and the Bird Man from Lascaux, okay? And now we've seen the other Bird Man from Liang Bulu Sifon 4 at Sulawesi, okay? I don't know what's the most important, but to me, now, if we just base purely on age, then we've got the oldest depictions of Therianthropes and the oldest scenes found anywhere in the world are in Sulawesi, in Indonesia, in this island in Indonesia, okay? For at least 51,200 years old in the case of the narrative scene, and at least 48,000 years old in the case of the Therianthrope. Again, this ability to conceive of the supernatural world, which is the heart of storytelling, okay? That's what stories do. They enable us to conceive of the existence of things that don't exist, okay? It's a crucial part of what it means to be human. So we're seeing visual evidence for this. We're seeing surviving material evidence for this in the cave art in Indonesia, okay? Which suggests to me, that was the big dramatic moment, the big reveal. It suggests to me that, we're seeing now that, our discoveries are suggesting our storytelling is a much older part of human history, okay, and the history of art in particular. This is something that did not evolve in Europe, okay, did not emerge in Europe. I don't think it emerged in Indonesia either, but we've got the earliest evidence for it now in Indonesia. I think all we had is the oldest surviving evidence for it. I think storytelling has been a fundamental part of what made us who we are. Okay. And most certainly, in my opinion, it evolved somewhere in Africa. Okay. Before our species. We're an African species. Before our species left our revolutionary homeland, spread out into other parts of the world. I believe that this ability has very, very deep roots. And one day an archaeologist will find evidence for that somewhere in Africa. But right now, the earliest surviving evidence we have for it that we know about seems to be in Indonesia, which is an interesting story in itself. This is a wonderful artwork from one of the talented artists at Leakey, depicting, ancient humans sitting around a campfire 48,000 years ago in Sulawesi, telling the story about the Anoa being hunted by these little part human, part animal creatures. I really love this image. And also, so this was then considered, again, one of the top 10 scientific breakthroughs of the year. There's also, not too many other things that had, not too many of the top 10 discoveries have anything to do with human evolution. Now, 2 of them are our Sulawesi rock art sites. So that, I guess, emphasizes that our peers are seeing this is important work. And this is just pure boasting, but I had to put this quote again by I might have taken this from my promotion application, this slide as well. But the esteemed archaeologist, Dr. April Noel, recently said on the publication of this oldest cave art, that this team is almost single-handedly changing the history of art. So I think this is starting to emphasize that, if we're going to look at what is the most important work of art, individual work of art in the world, well, naturally, I like to think it's the Sulawesi art that we've discovered, okay? I like to think that we have discovered the most important art in the world, okay? But, to ask that question, to return to that question, what is the most important work of art in human history? To me, it's the art of storytelling, okay? That is what is the most important thing, is this ability to tell stories using pictures, okay? Not the individual artworks themselves. It's a fluke of preservation, okay? They are important, but they were just made by those people, and they acquired this incredible importance to us. But to those people, they probably were just, images. Okay. But the important point here is it's the art of storytelling is the most important thing. Okay. And that is something that has ruined the other big dramatic moment. Just pretend you didn't see that. Okay. The art of storytelling has been around for a very long time. And I think it's evolved by, in the process of people sitting around campfires, telling these stories, warding off the spirits of the night or whatever. This has been a very, very ancient part of the human story, okay? And we're all sharing it today as well, every time we tell stories. So thank you very much, and I hope you've enjoyed the talk.